Hello and welcome to the Enquiry Podcast. My name is Nerida Mills. I am your host, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you along for this episode. What we do in the Enquiry Podcast is really explore and inquire with experts in their field in regards to what it is that actually creates a human experience, and more importantly, what it is that we can use to influence the human experience for our own development, growth, and expansion. So welcome along. Let's dive in, and I hope you enjoy it. Okay, hello everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Enquiry Podcast. I am here with the beautiful Nicole Marion, who I'm so excited to have on the podcast. You are just a powerhouse of a woman, and your influence in the sphere of wellness, well-being, and education is quite inspiring, and it gives me hope in our education system that it is shifting in positive ways. Obviously, that's just one arm of the things that you're doing. So I would love for you to introduce yourself, share what you feel is most alive for you right now, as far as what it is that you're doing and what you're kind of interested in, and we'll take it from there.
Absolutely. It's funny you mentioned that about coming back to the education aspect. I'm going to start with what really lights me up, and it's the multidimensional aspect of the human experience. And I think coming from a place of addiction and having my own experience as a bully in high school, and also being told I was, dumb, really inspired me to go into and seek and become curious about lived experience and what it actually meant in that education system. And that's, I think, where I started, was really wanting to understand self and understanding why things weren't making sense to me in my world. So lived experience is really important. And that's why I think we get along so well, is because life as medicine has always been something that really makes me excited. And because I knew that I had this kindness and love piece to me, but it was so misrepresented. So I was so angry in life that I swore initially in that world that I didn't want other families or other children to feel abandoned or isolated. So that was the start of my experience in working with communities. And I left high school at 15. I was a dropout, and then went on to work in childcare. And always had the spirit part, always was connected to spirit, spoke to dead people from, a very young age, had seances, did all the things. So multidimensional aspects and lived experience and community and connection have been the foundation of my work. And it started with me. And it started with me being in the mess of life and seeing life as poison rather than as medicine.
Which is a very easy misconception to have, especially in for lack of a better word, in an immature or a maturing brain is probably a better word for it, right? As the brain is maturing and we don't quite have all of the pieces, and we haven't quite been humbled enough to recognize that maybe our dogmas aren't necessarily accurate.
Absolutely. And the funny thing is you believe what you believe, right? So when I believed that it was poison and that I was tainted with, a bad brush or whatever you want to call it, I manipulated situations to evidence why life for me was poisonous, hence the addictions and the anger and the outrage and the bullying and all that sort of stuff. And then I went, hang on a minute, this doesn't make sense. And that's when I tapped more into that intuition and the spirit side of my aspect, and then went on to study and studied and proved myself from ego still that I wasn't dumb, that I could do this. And I think that's why I've stepped back into education, is to support young people in understanding that all of those beautiful qualities of them, and even the stories that they tell themselves about not being good enough, are just stories. They're part of the story.
Part of the story. Yeah. I love that. It's so important, because I think it's because obviously the ego is very convincing. And obviously we don't get rid of an ego. It's not like you actually ever transcend the ego, you'd be dead. But we can have higher quality ego, right?
Absolutely.
in the sense of we're actually kind to ourselves and believe in ourselves and back
Yeah, yeah.
ourselves.
And I think even the parts that are unkind, they drive us, right? They drive us
Yeah.
to humble ourselves and to comfort that aspect of self. And I think if I didn't have that fiery spirit or the aggression in the earlier days and that loud ego, I wouldn't be sitting here with you really enthusiastic about this conversation and excited about the potential and the possibilities of the world that we live in today.
Mm. It is such an interesting time to be alive, right?
It is. It is. It's exciting. We're
Yeah.
not there yet. I think, paradigms take, and we've had these conversations before together, paradigms take
Long.
a long time to shift.
Yeah.
And you and I are in it for the long haul,
Yeah.
right? And so it's exciting, it's frustrating, and it is interesting, but I think that it's the perfect time to be rattling and disrupting and having these hard conversations with probably people in leadership in education systems
Mm.
around lived experience. I think life is medicine. I think we're still tiptoeing around this authenticity and this being real about it. I don't have any shame about the addict part of me or the bully part of me. And some people do. They have a hard time with it, but I don't. And I think that there's a real gift in us having these real conversations around a table in leadership, in education, and in other supportive structures. I'm talking, when I say education, community services, psychology, social work, all of those aspects, even aged care.
Mm.
Having these real lived experience conversations and awareness. I feel like, yes, we're in really exciting times and we're in the perfect time to be having these conversations, but there's still a definite, I don't like the word lack. What's the right word, Nerida,
Yeah.
that I'm looking for? I don't know.
If I see that there's a fear in the letting go of the old, which is normal, and that is part of the process. But it's like if I am to accept the possibility of the new, it means that I have to let go of the fact that I might not have been as right as I thought that I was. And that's like number one pet peeve of the ego. We don't want to do that. And that happens as an individual and it happens as a collective, and we can
Yeah.
scout that out as wide as we want. But there
Yeah.
is, I think that, I mean, fear is at the underlying sense of everything that's unresourceful, really. But there's not that that's a bad thing. As you mentioned, we need fear just as much as we need the love. But if we're looking at what stops the shift, I think that's what it is. It's a lot of unresourceful fear-based ego.
Mm. Isn't it such a beautiful place to come from when you just say, I don't know?
I think it's the most fertile place to come from, honestly.
It
And I
is.
mean, that's taken me a long time to get to. Like I am like everybody else. Like it's uncomfortable, right? The I don't know space, I call it void space. It's like the in-between knowings or in between structures of reality that we can hold on to or that we can solidify into a sense of something. And when you're in between those stages and you don't have anything to necessarily grip onto as like, this is reality, this is truth, this is me, they are so uncomfortable. So, so, so uncomfortable. But it is so fertile because if you meet it with real consciousness and intention, then you have the potential to choose what you build. And that's
Yes.
critical. Not all of
Yes.
it, some of it's inevitable, but some of it you
Yeah.
have influence around. So,
Yeah.
call me crazy, but I am a bit of a control freak and I do like to influence what I can. So,
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. And I think we can be both right because being in that liminal space of or the no thingness, it's bloody awful.
oh, so
But it's
uncomfortable.
also when you come through the other side of it and you witness and you have that awareness piece to reflect. It's like, oh yeah. And when you start to stack that, when you go on this into this process and you live as a lived experience
Yeah,
being and you welcome in all of it. And
yeah,
that's what we do, isn't it? That's what we're here for.
absolutely. Well, and I think that's where we're going as a society right now is into the void.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
that we have known how to people, right? More or less, not always
Yep.
right, but we've known how to people in a certain paradigm of experience. And, AI is driving a lot of the unpredictability, but also, I literally just interviewed an astrologer and we're talking about the astrology of the time. It's so interesting. So we've got that behind it as well. And then you've got restructuring of our global society and what does that mean? And, the necessities around that are there's so many different reasons as to why we need to restructure things in that sense. And, where does individual freedom meet collective responsibility? And, all of these questions are sort of being thrown up into the air, and the answers that used to be so solid are seeming quite not solid anymore.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
it's very interesting in that, like, I don't know how long the void space is going to last in that as a collective. I would imagine longer than what it would as an individual. Um, but it's understandable that so many people are so at their edge because as we experience
I
collectively,
think,
experience individually, right?
yeah, I agree. I ask myself this question a lot in how, because I want to move into having conversations around ethical standards. And it's a boring subject, typically. And because I'm still a registered, well, it depends on who you talk to, right? It's not boring for me and for you. But I was sitting with, this code of ethics, and I've had some conversations with some of the marketing team that I work with, and he's quite sort of set in how his strategy works. And I was like, can't we, bring in the dimensions of this work, but it breaches the code. And there's this challenge that I have, because living by that code it's an old system,
Mm,
and it works if you are following a linear process.
mm.
Not linear.
No, and you can't keep teaching children a linear process and
No,
saying the right thing for
no.
them. It's
But you
like,
can't teach this. You've got to embed it. You've got to embody it. So what I see is the gap in our systems is, first, the leaders have to embody the non-linear system.
mm,
And that comes from ethics and
mm,
standards. And how do we have those hard conversations with ourselves? We all know what a code of ethics is and moral practices and principles, but do we ever sit and really think about, on a day-to-day basis, how could we do better? Where could I shift that? Or what was that conversation? I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, I think that comes down to the individual's personal responsibility in their own life,
Absolutely.
between that.
Yeah.
But,
But
how
are
do we
we
take that?
upholding it?
Yeah, how do we take that and make it systemic,
Yeah. Yeah.
particularly in areas that you're talking about, education, community engagement, and community services? I mean, they're the areas that, I mean, it's going to be interesting because I think, like, inevitably these things will be forced. And I don't know how that forcing will take place. I don't think it's going to be,
I
from
think it might be energetically. I think it'll be a
all
vibrational.
upgrading. So it's kind of it's a forcing in it, and it forces through the individual. But what are the what's the right word? What are the pressure points that is creating that force? I don't know.
Could even be sickness. Because coming back to well-being, I think they're the harder conversations we have to have around what is well-being, because there's so
Hmm.
many, and there's so many tokenistic, all systems are jumping on this well-being wagon, right?
So what would you define well-being as?
It's having an awareness of the many dimensions and facets of the human experience, and understanding that we don't exist in isolation, and that not even a part of us, and even in the healing spaces now, practitioners will focus on gut health or mental health or a certain aspect of a human. Even in education, educators are there to teach. That is their responsibility.
That's
But
it.
well-being is relational, and it's relation to the many facets of not just education, but relational to the people that we're teaching.
Mm.
For
Yeah.
me, it's awareness. It's having an awareness of our surroundings, of our environment, of the many structures and dimensions that we not only exist in, but that are inside of us.
Mm.
And
And
having the capacity to hold all of those moving parts with an integrity and a sense of curiosity and a sense of respect and reverence and grace. That's well-being to me.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
Mm.
It's so magical because I mean, even when people say if a person recognizes those parts of self, but doesn't necessarily have a good relationship with those parts of self, with all of the parts of self, it might only be like 3 or 4 parts that you don't have good relationship with.
Mm. Mm.
But if you don't have good relationship with those 3 or 4 parts, there's a whole heap of different diagnoses we could put on you, to explain away those parts, as opposed to integrating those parts and
Mm.
um, coming into partnership with them,
Yes.
being able to move forward from an integrated state. And then now, do we have a diagnosis? I don't know, but it's worth a crack first, right?
Oh, look, probably an unpopular opinion, but I'm not a fan of diagnosis,
No.
even though I work in the supportive structures of a system that I need to align with some of those diagnoses. They give us a framework and a reference point, but I think a lot of the diagnosis, and again, this might upset a few people, sorry, not sorry, but I feel like if we could almost put all of it into perceived trauma, childhood trauma.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I agree.
But we do that's the paradigm that hasn't shifted yet,
Yeah.
and that's a whole other rabbit hole we could go down, right?
Yeah, there are very, 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 very few psychological conditions that are actually based on biology. There are very few. Most of them are trauma based.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And defense mechanisms are very sophisticated.
Mm.
And look, it is the structure of the mind can be very powerful in the way it sets up defenses and the nervous system and the way in which the body communicates
Yeah.
with the brain and the heart and the
I
gut.
like to use a different word around.
Yeah, please do.
I like to, and I'll explain why. I like to use the word protection mechanisms as opposed to
Yes,
defense mechanisms.
defense. Yeah.
Because defense mechanisms for me insinuates that there's a part of me fighting another part of me, right? So it's like you're wrong, so I need to make sure that you don't happen. It's adversarial. Whereas a protection mechanism comes from, even though it's still got that element of adversarial, it insinuates a point of love as the origin to the behavior rather than a point of fear to the origin of the behavior.
I like that. And it's safety. Defense is unsafe.
Yeah,
Protection's safe. Yeah,
yeah,
that's cool. All
yeah.
right, I'll have to try and unpack my counselling studies and degree.
One
The
of the first
attachment
things that
theory in me.
One of the first things that I encourage all of my clients to change their language around this self-sabotage. I'm like, it's not self-sabotage. There's no part of you that is trying to like fuck you over.
Yeah, why would it? Why would
No,
we
why
want
would
to
it?
sabotage
That
ourselves? Yeah,
insinuates that you're wrong, right?
yeah,
There's a part of you that is protecting you because it loves you, which then
yeah,
goes into the whole story of, well, I just need to love myself more, right?
yeah,
I don't love myself enough. And I'm like, well, how about if you were always loving yourself, but some of the ways in which you're loving yourself are semi-unresourceful, right? It's like when a parent is trying to protect a child, sometimes that love of protection can be expressed through an unresourceful form, right? We yell at the
yes,
kid,
yep,
whatever, right? And there's a lot of things that can be or have been in the past justified based on that protection. And so it's not to say that love wasn't at the root cause of it though. And so if
yes,
just that switch in language, you can see that actually I love myself wholly and completely. My job is not to love myself more, but to increase the quality of the expression of that love.
yep,
But now I'm not
beautiful.
missing anything.
Yep. Well, even imposter syndrome, hey, I rarely use that. I don't know that we need to have this conversation with ourselves that we have an imposter inside of us that is yearning for some sense of knowledge and wisdom that it doesn't have. I just don't know about that.
It's
When
just
we know we have access to all of it, right?
it's a part of self that's trying to get some recognition, I think, is
Yeah,
more, like
yeah,
let's just acknowledge this part. And
yeah,
the
yeah,
unconscious mind is developed between the 0 to 7 age period. You're dealing with a child in that need. So a lot of people, I think, deal with themselves as if like their mind should be more mature. And it's like you're dealing with
yeah,
a child. You gotta, when people talk about inner child work, you're just talking about unconscious work. This
yeah, yeah.
programming
Well,
that's
yeah, Yeah, but even the child, I was having a conversation with my daughter the other day. She's 19 and her nephew is 5. I think it's 4 or 5. She's like, I don't know how to speak to kids. And I said, well, most people don't because they forget about how to communicate because we weren't really taught effective communication. But you break every conversation down and you just start with facial expressions because we respond so beautifully to a smile, just lighting up your face. And she goes, but that would be weird. I go, it's only weird because people have learned to close off
Yeah.
to how but if we engaged everyone like everyone was children,
Yeah.
imagine how much more open we'd be.
I would be putting faces at everybody whenever I see a
Well, I
kid.
still do. My early childhood years, I'm working in childcare and early childhood teaching. I still I'm a very animated person. But
Yeah.
someone said to me the other day, your energy is terrifying. And I'm like, oh, I wouldn't have called it that.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting expression. Yeah.
An interesting
Well,
expression,
I
right?
mean, it
Because I'm
just,
so animated.
yeah. So it's interesting. So how do you see, how do I want to ask this question? Obviously, we're in this place where we're right on the edge of the void, right?
Mm.
We're going to have some time. It's going to be really uncomfortable, and there's going to be some shifts and some changes, and probably some prodding and some poking from areas that we don't really want, but is inevitable. Then there's the other side of the void. Where do you see us going?
Where do I see us going? As a system, like in education, or okay, where do I see us going? Well, I think that there will be more of an embodiment of wholeness. I think there will be a lot more talk around spirituality. I think spirituality will be a conversation that will be brought up and raised and embodied in different ways and not seen as fluffy. There will be evidences in the science because we're getting there. We know energetically that spirituality is a science. I feel like, and I think that we it's a big loaded question.
It is.
I think it is. I think we're a while away. Not to be pessimistic, I'm an optimist, but I do believe that there's going to be a lot more integration and a bridging of the science and the spirit, a lot more flexible learning, a lot more play-based. We're going to come back to a lot of those Reggio Emilia approach, Steiner's, all of those Montessori sort of teachings, but more of an embodied, embedded structure. So they're all great theories, and a lot of educators do it really well, but I feel like the whole system is going to come on board with the embodiment of that.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of, I mean, so here's the challenges that I see.
That's my wish anyway. Maybe I'm living in a fantasy.
Yeah, we're all living in a fantasy. Might as well choose which one. One of the things that I see is the issue at the moment. I've got we only have 2 children left in high school, but I've had a number of kids go through the school system. And my eldest 2 daughters actually went through quite a number of different school systems. We had them in Steiner, we had them in alternative public, then we had them in mainstream public, fucking terrifying. Then we had them in another public school to try and avoid the challenges of the first mainstream public school because the level of bullying was just insane for grade 1 and grade 3-year-olds. And then we did the homeschooling, and we had a couple of different iterations of the homeschooling. So we ended up going to unschooling and then into child-led learning. That was basically our transition. And then one of those kids went back into a public, independent public school. And then the other one maintained her homeschooling experience, but was in charge of her homeschooling experience. So this was grade 10 on, and she was in charge. And so, the girls have had a very wide variety of different schooling experiences, whereas my son has been in the same primary school his entire primary school career from year 1 through, and then now he's in high school. And what's interesting to me in the school system is that particularly in our more traditional public school systems, it literally feels to me that what actually happens is they kill a child's natural desire to learn.
Yes.
It just disintegrates before your eyes, which is why, one of the...
And that's why the embodiment piece, having a well teacher and a well system teach. And I think that's teachers are overworked they've got a lot of ticking in the boxes. You've frozen, so I hope this is
Yeah,
working.
I can
You're
still
right
hear
with the
you. I
back.
don't know why I froze.
Okay. Did you hear what I was saying?
Yeah.
Okay. So I feel like that's why we have to have that well-being piece and the bridging of spirit and science, because while we know this, knowing it's not enough, we need the piece that is embodiment, the piece of that. And that's why I've got two daughters, and I used to get teased at school because they were in my classes, and their attendance rate was probably around 30%. Through right from primary school. I love education. I think I have a very high value of learning. However, I didn't feel as though the system itself supported education in the way of a curious learner. So they spent a lot of time with my dad and my mum and my in-laws at the time, and they learned so much being out of school and in, hanging off swings and climbing trees and making pancakes and cooking and things like that. So I understand exactly what you're saying. And that's, you asked me where the future of education is going. I think that we need the embodiment piece and also that integration, the understanding that there are many facets to us, and that the teacher, no longer are the days where the teacher stands at the end of the classroom and dictates and speaks at and then challenges the child for being rude or disrespectful, for asking questions and things like that. But
That is still alive
it
and
still
well
happens.
right now.
It absolutely is. And that's why I said, those the approaches in theory work, but are they being embedded and embodied in a system?
No.
Because we are still lagging in this respect for spirituality and well-being, or the wholeness of an individual and the wholeness of education and what it actually means. People don't actually really know because they haven't gone on their own journeys.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think,
Evident.
yeah, it
Definitely.
is.
In the way that they
Absolutely.
children. One of the things that always made me laugh cry was the idea that a child is unteachable. And it's like, we need to remove this child because the child is unteachable. I'm like, no, you haven't figured out how to teach them. It's actually the responsibility of the teacher to learn how to teach a child, not the responsibility of a child to learn how to learn in your teaching method. Like it's like a parent saying it's the responsibility of a child to feel safe in their home. Like that's not, it's the other way
That's
around.
ridiculous. Yeah. And it's got to come from inspiration.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, we haven't even touched on AI and how that is going to impact the requirements of education. Because at the moment, the education system was obviously developed to pump out factory workers a long, long time ago. And, hasn't really fundamentally changed since then. But, with the actualization of AI, which is not too far away, if we survive that actualization of AI, it's going to be quite interesting as far as what that actually means from an education standpoint. Like, what are we being prepared for in that world?
Yes. Yeah. Well, there is a lot of education on our parts of how we integrate it and how we educate our students in the secondary years on how to use it appropriately. There's still some challenges in the university sector. We're having a really hard time. We actually had a student that had an assessment and was completely failed of that whole unit because there was an accusation of her using AI, and she didn't use AI. She's a beautiful writer. And now the challenge for her is she's destabilized in that because she's now got a judgment against her. There is, as humans, we have this tendency to lean towards bias. So now that has been sort of flagged, there's a bias in the grading of that. And so they're the challenges that we don't quite know, we haven't got our heads around yet, is how do we use it safely? How do we use it not as a plagiarized method or tool? And how do we support the student learning and the coming on board with where we're going in the future with AI, but in a way that's safe? And so there's a lot of, it's quite an amazing tool.
Yeah. Well, even the preparation for work though, right? Like,
yeah, we all use it. I find it's cut my time down so much in some of the mundane tasks of the day-to-day work.
I mean, in the sense of like the how do I word it? The mass job loss that is inevitable, right? Like all of us,
Ah, yes. Sorry.
like
Yep. I thought you meant
school,
how's it going to impact our students' learning.
yeah,
Yep.
no,
Yep.
so obviously
Yeah.
school is there to provide some form of education around how to adult.
Yep.
And part of adulting is providing income source for self and family. And if those, jobs that we have relied on for such a long time are no longer available, like
Mm,
what are we preparing these kids for? And how do we do that effectively? I've done quite a bit of research for some time now in regards to this, and the consistent messaging is resilience, creativity, innovation, confidence.
mm,
They're
mm.
the four markers that kids are going to need because ultimately, whatever world we think they're going to go into in 5 years will also be fundamentally different from that 5 year marker to the next 5 year marker. They are going to have to move, adjust, and change.
Adaptability.
Yeah.
Yep. And
And if
which is
they're
what we
not
need to take.
at the forefront of the creation, if they're not the leaders of creation, then they're probably not going to have an income source. So
No. Well, we
it's
have a great model that where we've linked up with Melbourne University, and we have a model of supporting agency in learning.
mm,
And it aligns with a lot of those factors. So I think, and not necessarily in comparison, there are, where am I going with this? Is it still comes back to the well-being piece, though, if you think about it, that there are many moving parts to a system,
mm.
and we are relational. That can never change. We don't exist. We cannot survive in isolation. It's impossible. So we have to keep that resilience factor, the creativity, the inspiration, and a couple of what were the other words that you used? They
Innovation.
are innovation, and agency. And I wonder. I don't see it being sustainable. Do you think that AI and the direction of how it's going to take over a lot of employment or the jobs, do you feel as though that's going to be sustainable long term if we're relational beings?
Yeah, I think that it will be. I think that like my delusion around this, whatever, the way that I see things moving, is that AI will take over, however long that takes, 10, 20 years, but most of the jobs that we currently do, I don't think will be available to us anymore. It's just not going to be economical. I think
Yeah.
where we're going to have, as I mentioned, influence in the market is in being the business owner and then utilizing AI,
Mm,
being a creative director and then utilizing AI for the actual work of those things. So really stepping into our authority and then utilizing AI to support that authority.
mm.
And also, like I've told my kids, entrepreneurship, property. Like they're the two areas that I'm really pushing them.
Yep.
Because I
Even
don't
trades, a lot of, I think a lot of
it's
hands-on
for
technical trade.
robots are out, and then once robots
Yeah.
come, and then
Yeah.
that goes
Yep.
right. So, but where I see us going as a society is actually back to historical crafts, arts and crafts.
Mm. Hmm.
Like working with our hands and really
Yes.
appreciating the quality of a human made something,
Yes.
as
Yep.
opposed to because what are you going to do with your time? I think we'll actually revert back to what has been long forgotten, which is periods of time spent in community creating things.
Yeah, maybe coming back to the land. I love that. Look, I probably, in my delusion, I'm a romantic, and I just have this deep inherent belief that, humans have to come back to that piece, that importance of collaboration and connection, and yeah.
And there is something extremely fulfilling in making something with your hands and actually,
Oh,
writing
absolutely.
that down. Like I've got a friend, I went to their house yesterday actually for a little get together that we had. And um, the uh, the couple had, or predominantly the man in the couple, had made this beautiful dining table for the family. They have a blended family, so they've got a big family, so they needed a big table, And if you're looking at buying a big table brand new, you're looking at 8, 10 grand. It's just
Isn't that wild?
it's insane. And so he was just like, he's a handyman. He goes, I can do this. And so they made this table together, which is stunning. Like everybody who walks into the house goes, oh my God, that table is just beautiful. Where did you get it from? And then they tell the story, and it's this whole like lovely
How
thing. Um, And I was sitting next to Adam at the time, and he was just like, this is like a family heirloom, what we're sitting at right now. They've made a family heirloom. And I was just
And the
like,
conversations that are going to happen around that table and the memories that will be made.
yeah. And how many people can say nowadays that they've got something like that in their family line? It's just, yeah,
Yeah,
it's an interesting one. I'm
it is.
much like
And
you're
you know,
quite romantic.
I love that you brought that up because I'm going to come to my woo-woo, if you like to call
Bring
that,
it.
people. I teach psychometry, and it's the understanding that every object holds a value, holds a vibration and an imprint and a message. And there's two ways that that could hold that. The object itself holds a vibration of meaning based on where it's sourced from, and then we imprint that object with vibration. So it's like,
Mm.
and in the spirit space, in the energy space, we use psychometry or reading objects or tapping into the field of object in our surroundings to expand our understanding of other. So from a spirituality, tapping into our clairsentience, our claircognizance, our clair audience, all of those clairs, if you speak spirit language, it helps us engage. But through the sciences, it's about creating meaning, creating heirlooms, even in our
How I
offices.
associate too.
Yeah. And I think when I teach it, I don't just teach it in accessing our psychic space or our intuition. So when we're tapping into object for other, it helps us open up and reach out and expand our understanding of the psychic space or the energies around us. But it helps us also gain a sense of wisdom inside because we can set intentions in how we work with those energies in the imprint.
Mm.
But it's a really beautiful way, psychometry is, to understand and access and set up altars. People would refer to as prayer, but that is an altar for that family.
Mm.
That is a significant piece.
Oh
A
yeah,
time.
they are dinner party people,
And
like
imagine if we
well,
could use like some of that work, the psychometry work, and have that depth of understanding of the meaning behind it when we create with
mm,
our hands and when we tap into, the glimmer moments.
mm.
Is how often do we pick up something and really contemplate that contemplative practice of who made this? How old is it? How many hands has it passed? Where did it come from? What meaning does it hold? I don't know about you when you lead circle
We've
or you
we've
hold community.
forgotten about that though because most things are being pumped out of a factory, you know.
Yes. And
That's
so coming back to what you said, that making craft with our hands and tapping into the vibration of that craft is, yeah. And we're very resilient beings and our brain, I try to explain this to families when they're in couples or family therapy. And I try to explain to parents, and we even say it, we don't make kids the way we used to, or we don't think the way they did, or no, you don't, because your brain is an expanding, tangible, movable structure that grows and is our brains are made differently according to the times that we live and what we expose ourselves to. So I do feel like there is hope for us in
yeah.
the AI world. But like you said, we also have to axe the multidimensional, many facets of who we are as beings, not just over lean into
Yeah.
that aspect, because that's going to be dependent on how our brains expand and develop in resilience
I
as
think
well.
that's
Have
one
a
of the
mouth there. Hope that made sense.
Yeah, totally. And I think that one of the things that AI will bring us is forcing that conversation. What is it
Mm,
that defines a human consciousness, right? What is it that defines what humanity is? Because we're talking about a new consciousness, you know,
mm,
and up until now, the scientific community, predominantly, the scientific community has believed that the human consciousness is the most evolved consciousness and all of the things. And
mm,
and we're literally on the precipice of the birthing of a new consciousness. So, what does that mean about us as humans? What does it mean about me as an individual if a computer program can do the job that I have spent 20 years training and can pick it up in an instant? In an instant, like, what does that mean about me? And what does that mean about my worth? And
mm,
we're going to have to really redefine where we get our worth from because
mm.
I mean, particularly in the last sort of 200 years, but our worth has been very much associated to the job that you do or the role that you play in society, particularly the job that you do in the last 200 years. And I think that we're going to have to redefine that.
Absolutely. And that's the intellect though. Our worth is based on our identity, but our identity is based on intellect. And you can't intellectualize who we are.
No, well, exactly. You've got to have an expansion of that, right? We've got to
We
have
have to
it's got to encompass more aspects of self, and ideally all aspects of self, right? So,
all aspects, the multi and the lived
yeah.
experience parts and the unshaming and the really getting raw on the spirit parts, the even that language psychometry, I spoke to a couple of people the other day about it, and they were like they looked at me and like, what is that? And I'm like, it's actually a very valid,
Mm,
really beautiful underpinning that is it's worth looking at, because it helps you in intimate, if you see each other as object and you learn how to access
mm,
information in another through
mm.
their vibrational field, going back to telepathy, or I'm really unpacking
Now we're
now,
talking
but
about significant intuition.
do we
Yeah.
have to explain ourselves? Do we have to have worth based on our intellect?
Yeah.
Only functioning from a single part. Intellect, we could say, comes from the brain, right?
Yeah. Which already is not working. We can see that in the school system, right?
Well,
It's
human
value
consciousness,
based
where
on.
does it exist?
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
does it exist?
That's, I mean, $50 million question.
Oh, we could speak for hours on this stuff, couldn't
Could,
we?
we could. Oh, amazing. All right. So, Nicole, look, obviously, you do a whole heap of different stuff, and it all does interlink into this beautiful singular message point. If you could articulate that singular message point in a sentence, what would it be?
What would it be to live into your wholeness is to get curiosity. All right, that's really hard. Okay, now I'm an ADHD, bloody manifestor generator, multifaceted, one fucking sentence. How the fuck do I do that? Okay, let me think. Is to remind yourself on a day-to-day basis that the power is in the many multiple facets of who you are.
Mm,
And that the only way to integrate that is to become curious
mm,
and open-minded and open-hearted and open in the gut to that potential that is just waiting to be seen by yourself. I don't even remember what I just said.
love that. No, I
I
love
hope it
that.
was
So,
fucking good. Was it good?
yeah, I'll send you the clip of it.
I won't be able to tell you again.
No, but I mean that's truth though, right? Is
Yep.
in that moment, that's truth. So, God, I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much
I
for
loved it.
and sharing your wisdom with everybody. Let us know, how can people follow you, get in touch with you, get you
Yeah.
your work in their workplace, or work with you? How do people do that?
Absolutely. So if you are interested in psychometry and intimacy, in community, in your work, I am in the process of having my web designer put up a beautiful masterclass for you guys. So you can go to www.nicolemarion.com.au. Keep an eye out there, register your interest, and you will receive that psychometry masterclass as soon as it's up. Check out my Nicole Marion at Instagram and on Facebook. And they're the best ways to. I've got a podcast on Spotify, YouTube, podcast, iTunes, one of those lingos. You can see I don't set any of that back end up. I'm great at connecting with you all, but the
No, that's
back end
fine.
I leave to my team.
Outsource, which is
Yeah,
where
yep,
that's where AI is going to belong. So
it is
amazing. Thank you
so good.
much for your time today. And I just love that it doesn't matter how many times we get together, we had zero plan for today's conversation, like I do with all of my guests, but
Love it.
we always go in wonderful directions and circle back to some form of anchoring at the end, which I feel like we did today too. So
I
thank
think
you
so.
so much for your time.
Beautiful. Thank you. See
Okay, that is it from us for today for the Enquiry Podcast. All of the links that you're going to want to find is going to be underneath this episode. So jump along and make sure that you're following the people who do join us for the Enquiry Podcast. I'm sure you'll agree they are absolutely phenomenal, and it is my absolute pleasure to be able to have them come in and share their wisdom with everybody. If you're wanting to know what I'm up to, jump onto my website, neridamills.com, and you can check out all of my opportunities to get involved, be they free things or programs or events. You can always come along and say hi. I would love to see you.